Bitcoin is a big danger, and the code of Bitcoin could soon be broken. The limitation will then be lifted. Bitcoin is a Trojan horse to monitor you. It has no value and won't prevail. These are the shocking words that would now be spoken at the Alternative WEF Summit. Here we have 7 financial experts debating the future of money. Among others, experts like Ernst Wolff, Dr. Markus Krall, Benjamin Mudlack, and many others. These were mainly gold bugs that you saw on stage here. Very, very exciting discussion. But what I missed was the voice for Bitcoin. As you have already heard, some of the statements made here are fatal regarding Bitcoin. And this incompetence, which comes together here, is responsible for the fact that people are becoming poorer en masse, at least compared to Bitcoin. Often, alternative voices criticize that, like in Markus Lance's show, there's always some kind of 4-to-1 debate or something like that. But we didn't see a fair debate here at all. Instead, there was a massive attack against Bitcoin. I don't want to keep you in suspense any longer. I'll also put the link to the full interview down below. Let's dive right into the discussion. Let's go.
Gold, whether it's backed or covered, let's call it what we want. Is that a solution for you, Mr. Wolff?
I do believe it's a good thing. Money is tied to a physical value. We live in a time of digitalization and in an era where all these cryptocurrencies are being brought closer to us. I see this as a great danger because cryptocurrencies are ultimately nothing more than a data record, so they have no physical value. And a data record only has value as long as it's recognized as money by people. And that's why I think it's a really sensible thing to rely on a physical value like gold or precious metals in general.
Is there agreement among you too, Dr. Krall?
You don't really need to ask me about that. So it's obvious that I'm a gold bug. And gold has proven itself over the last 5,000 years, and I'm sure it will continue to do so for the next 5,000 years. I'm a skeptic when it comes to Bitcoin. That's well known. And that's simply because I always think of Bitcoin as a safe. And there's someone sitting in front of it trying to open the safe. And after a long struggle, he finally manages to open the door. And what does he find inside, Yuzan? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So Bitcoin seems a bit too self-referential to be able to replace gold.
So those are some pretty strong statements saying that Bitcoin is a danger because it's worthless, because there's nothing behind it. And that's basically the whole issue. That means some people just can't understand that information also has value. So we have an asset here that isn't physical, just like gold is, let's say, physical, while Bitcoin is not physical. You can't touch it. There's nothing in the safe. Bitcoin, when you break it down, is nothing more than information. You have 24 words, and in those 24 words, you can store billions, trillions, whatever. You can store an infinite amount, not infinite, but very, very high assets. You can basically walk across a border censorship-free, take your money with you everywhere without limits. And that's ultimately the power of Bitcoin, that we have money on a whole new level that we've never had before. And that's why I understand that many people, especially older folks, have a hard time with this. For example, coming from the gold vault, there's really nothing against gold. Ernst Wolff and Markus Krall are doing a great job. I interviewed Markus Krall and he's fantastic. I'll ask why no value in Bitcoin. Markus Krall's criticism is legitimate. Value and utility are subjective. I see value, he doesn't. It's all legitimate. And I would say that I find Markus Krall's criticism to be completely legitimate, that you can simply say, okay, I don't see any value here. Because value and usefulness are all completely subjective.
I see value here, they don't see value here. That's all completely legitimate.
But when someone like Ernst Wolff says, okay, Bitcoin isn't just worthless, but Bitcoin is also a danger, then I see that as very, very critical. Because what I'm increasingly realizing is that some people from the gold camp are starting to notice, hey, damn, there's another technology here that's way, way better than gold because we can transport it better. It's more censorship resistant. It's much scarcer because gold isn't really scarce. And we have a lot of advantages here. It's also better verifiable. We have many advantages over gold. And I say, you can criticize Bitcoin, but when you just say, hey, Bitcoin isn't just questionable, but Bitcoin is even dangerous, then in my opinion, that's definitely going too far. Then we also need to correct the statements here. And that's also the reason why I said at the beginning that many people get unsettled by such statements. And secondly, it really leads to, in the worst case, people becoming impoverished. Because people who don't get into Bitcoin are just going to become poorer compared to those who buy gold or those who buy stocks or something like that. Let's take a look at the last, 10 to 15 years. I mean, it doesn't have to be that way in the future, but that's just a little hint. This is, of course, not an investment recommendation. I'm not saying sell your gold and buy all Bitcoin or something like that. Everyone has to know that for themselves, I would say, but we really have to look at this critically.
How does it look in general? Could the cryptocurrency Bitcoin play a role? Dr. Krall has clearly expressed how he sees it. He's rather skeptical about it.
I believe that it actually plays a big role at the moment, and I believe that Dirk Müller wasn't entirely wrong when he said a few years ago that Bitcoin is nothing more than a Trojan horse. I believe that when you look at when Bitcoin came into the world, you have to have some doubts. Bitcoin came into the world in 2009, shortly after the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. The big interest back then was to eventually introduce a new monetary system, digital central bank money. That was slowly becoming apparent back then, and especially young people had to be prepared to embrace digital money. And that's exactly the role Bitcoin played back then. A lot of people, especially young people, have jumped on the Bitcoin bandwagon. And we've seen lately that there's been incredible manipulation with Bitcoin. What many people don't know is that Bitcoin is anything but a democratic currency because 91% of Bitcoin is in the hands of big investors, and only 9% is in the hands of regular earners. Just that alone shows you that this currency can definitely be moved in one direction or another by big investors. An extreme example would be Elon Musk, who is well known to everyone. When Elon Musk says something positive about Bitcoin on his own network, X, then it goes up. If he says something negative, it goes down. So anyone who invests in this currency needs to know that they're not financially independent. They're dependent on the big investors and the people who dominate social media.
So, what's being said here is simply not correct. That Bitcoin is controlled by big investors, Wall Street people, and big capital like Elon Musk and so on. What's striking about Bitcoin is that for the first time, we have an investment where, let's say, the grassroots, the little people were there before Wall Street, before the big players like BlackRock and others. BlackRock just got into Bitcoin about a year ago. A year ago, there were about 19.5 million Bitcoins or something like that. So by the time 19.5 million Bitcoins had been mined, BlackRock wasn't even in the game yet. There was no Donald Trump, no Elon Musk here. Okay, Elon Musk might have been around when there were about 19.12 million Bitcoins or something like that. But what's striking is that with Bitcoin, the situation is really clear. Most of the Bitcoin is in private hands. So that means either in the form of miners or just in the form of some Bitcoin whales or whatever. One might criticize that there's a lot of centralization. There are a few big whale addresses, like, for example, from Satoshi Nakamoto. Then there are a few more big whale addresses. But even if BlackRock were to buy up all the remaining Bitcoins that are, let's say, still in circulation, which is just over 1 million Bitcoins that will come into circulation over the next 100 years, even if they bought all of those, BlackRock would still only have about 5 or 6% of the Bitcoin supply. And you could also say, okay, Michael Saylor is a certain whale with 2%, but even if they have 10 or 20% here, they still can't change the rules because that's what a lot of people don't understand. Also here, where it's said that Bitcoin is undemocratic, that's just not true. If they have a percentage of the Bitcoin network, then they can't change the rules here. For that, you need the consensus of the entire Bitcoin network. You really have to deal with the Bitcoin node and the proof of work mechanism. It's not like proof of stake or in our current fiat world, where the one with the most money has the most voting power in the network. That's not the case at all. And then slogans are thrown around like, for example, Bitcoin is the Trojan horse. It's being compared here to the CBDC, like a digital euro and stuff. And the idea is that people are being prepared for the digital euro, which is, of course, a huge stretch. There's no evidence for that at all. And here too, the facts are wrong because Bitcoin is not primarily used by young people. Even though most people won't believe it, if you look at the statistics, the majority of people who are interested in Bitcoin are actually older. Young people don't have any money to invest, they're just not interested in it. On our channel, you can clearly see in the statistics that there are more people over 70 watching our channel than people under 20. You can hardly believe it. The percentage of people under 20 watching our channel is at 1%, and the percentage of people over 70 watching our channel is around 8% or something like that. So it's incredible. The investment demographic for Bitcoin is somewhere between 40 and 60 years old, and people under 30 just aren't interested in Bitcoin. They're probably caught up in their leftist views and their green politics, busy with other things like gluing themselves to the streets. That's a very unfair thing to say, a bit exaggerated, sorry, my bad, but in the end, that's just the reality. Facts are being put on the table that aren't really true.
Is there a supporter for Bitcoin in this round, or does everyone see it more skeptically?
I'd like to give a neutral answer, saying that I ultimately don't know. If you look at the origins of money, how money came to be, it was created through human action, where people cooperated with each other and eventually realized this is money. And that was then gold and silver currency. So in that respect, I'm also missing information on many things, the origins of Bitcoin, etc. I would say that over time, people will figure out what the right money is, and that's why I support the competition for the best money, and Bitcoin is currently a candidate for that.
I would also add that the essential thing a currency needs is trust, and gold has proven its trust for 6,000 years. And that's why most people around the world believe in gold. Bitcoin hasn't built that kind of trust with people yet. Money doesn't have intrinsic value. It only has a function in an economy, or three functions in the economy. And in that respect, this trust needs to be established at all. And I agree with Ernst Wolff in that if 91% of these Bitcoins are in the hands of a few or held by large investors, then it's very, very hard to establish trust. The second thing is that Bitcoin is only truly undisputed or even unique as long as the code can't be cracked. But it is only a matter of time before the computing power is sufficient to crack the code. And if it's true that patents have already been filed on how to decrypt the Bitcoin code, or then it's just a matter of time before it can actually be decrypted. And then it becomes pretty much obsolete to think about whether Bitcoin is a legitimate thing, because then I could also replicate it. So that limitation that I've promised everyone is just an empty promise. And then it actually becomes relevant to think about whether Bitcoin is a legitimate thing, because then I could also multiply it. So that limitation that I promised everyone is just an empty promise. So that trust has to be established first. Most people don't even know how to handle these Bitcoins. But the problems we have now are so urgent that there is simply not enough time to teach everyone in the world how to handle this Bitcoin. And that's why the world will automatically tend to fall back on what has always worked in a crisis like this. And I firmly believe that it will be gold and silver. And the BRICS countries have basically already done it. They have introduced something like a gold standard, not a fixed gold standard.
I can definitely understand the argument about the 6,000 years of history and trust. And of course, it takes a long time for Bitcoin to gain trust. But just look at where we are now after 15 years. And to be honest, just write to me in the comments. I trust cryptography and mathematics more than some people who issue gold certificates, because the reality is that the gold price is massively diluted by those gold certificates. And in the end, that's the issue. The gold market is manipulated. And here you might ask yourself, okay, do you trust nature and gold more, believing that gold will continue to be scarce in the future? Because the next thing is that gold will no longer be scarce at some point when technological progress allows us to mine gold in space and whatever, we can simply push the boundaries here, let's say. Technological progress will come at some point, as Elon Musk has already mentioned, and he also says that one day it will be possible to mine gold in space at almost zero cost. Of course, that may still be a long way off, but with Bitcoin, I know for sure that the limit cannot be broken so easily. And that is why, at least personally, I believe more in mathematics and cryptography than I do in gold. But someone else can do that. So, as Benny Mudlack says, the best money will prevail. That was a good point he made, seeing it neutrally and just saying, okay, the best should win out. We can discuss whether Bitcoin is more trustworthy or if gold is more trustworthy. That's something everyone can answer for themselves and assess for themselves. But the highlight here is that it's being said that the Bitcoin code will soon be cracked, and there's already a patent for decrypting the Bitcoin code. It's just a matter of time before the Bitcoin code gets broken. And that's probably why all the quantum stuff is going viral right now. Everyone is now afraid that a big quantum computer will come and crack the Bitcoin code or whatever. So that's really a stretch. I've already made videos about how the danger is still very far off. And even if it comes to the point where quantum computers could really pose a threat to the Bitcoin network, you can still make changes to the code to make the Bitcoin network quantum resistant. There will definitely be solutions for that. Sure, it can get a bit complicated. You might have to set up your software again or send your Bitcoin to a new address or something like that, but there are definitely ways to do it. And it's also very clear that there's absolutely no engagement with Bitcoin here because they're talking about 2001 as if the code can somehow be cracked. At the same time, it's being said that the limitation can be lifted. Here is basically a fundamental misunderstanding of how Bitcoin works. So, on one hand, we have the algorithm that determines there will be a maximum of 21 million Bitcoins through the halving process, where the rewards are halved every 4 years. And that's basically a Bitcoin consensus that everyone can vote on for themselves. And this consensus can't be hacked or anything like that because you can just run your own Bitcoin node. And on that node, you can set your own rules for the Bitcoin network. And no hacker can come in and change the consensus or anything like that from the Bitcoin network. And if you lift the limitation, that would mean that across all, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of nodes there are worldwide, you'd have a Trojan, something like that, running in parallel. And the Trojan sneaks in and says, okay, instead of having 20 or 21 million, we now only have, I don't know, 19 million, or for all I care, 50 million or whatever. So it's clear that the cryptography, the cryptographic encryption with the Bitcoin code is being confused with the Bitcoin software. Quantum computers may crack Bitcoin's SHA, risking keys. The SHA algorithm of Bitcoin is cracked. That's also the thing with the quantum computer, that you can suddenly calculate the private keys of Bitcoin, that you can e.g. So, the 24 words that are randomly generated, you could somehow break the encryption mechanism of Bitcoin through brute forcing or just by making so many attempts. So here you can clearly see that they're just rambling on about some nonsense. And I've already said that I suspect there's just a lot of Bitcoin bashing going on. Here, there's really no argument based on expertise. It's just a massive bashing of Bitcoin.
But it goes even further. Mr. Bachheimer on top of that.
And I don't believe Bitcoin is money, but money essentially has three functions: the store of value, the medium of exchange, and the unit of account. And the unit of account function has mostly been fulfilled by gold throughout human history because gold has the highest stock-to-flow ratio. So how much gold is there and how much do I produce in a year in this space? And we need 70 years for that worldwide. And with today's production data, I need 70 years to have what you would actually want to hold in gold, what is known. And the higher the stock-to-flow, the more accurately I can measure goods and services because it's inherently unforgeable. And in 5,000 years of monetary history, gold has always had the highest stock to flow. And this year in April, something strange happened. Bitcoin is not a good, I know, you're looking serious, but Bitcoin has a higher stock to flow than gold. That happened this April due to the halving. So I would say it would be quite legitimate for humanity to use a Bitcoin-like mechanism as a benchmark function to compare international prices. And that's why I can say Bitcoin and similar things could one day take on a function.
Mr. Hambach, do you have any Bitcoin?
Yeah, just a little 0.0 something. So I just bought a few things to understand how the thing actually works. And I don't plan to use Bitcoin per se as an investment or speculation object. And I'm not 100% Bitcoin fan either. I would rather count myself among the skeptics. But if we look at the whole thing practically, then Bitcoin is primarily an investment instrument with which you can speculate just like investors or diversify their capital based on the prices of coffee, pork bellies, or other things. So for those who want to speculate, there's really nothing wrong with that. You have to decide how much of my portfolio I'm going to put into this basket, my investments. That's one side of it. And it would be perfectly fine if you look at it from the investor's perspective. I'm also a bit skeptical about the origin story and the technology, especially since there are now quantum computers. A few weeks ago, Google achieved another huge breakthrough by reducing the error rate in quantum computers, which was already considerable, to almost zero. And now I probably agree with my colleagues here that we are not far from the point where it might even be cracked soon. But on the other hand, what are you going to do as a system critic labeled a threat to democracy by Pfizer when your accounts get frozen? You can't just hop into a car with a backpack full of 10 kilos of gold and expect to escape. you'll get pulled over at the first border. Bitcoin is maybe at the moment in the hands of big investors. You can also trade put and call options on the major cryptocurrencies. It's a store of value and you're independent. You can also trade corresponding put and call options on the major cryptocurrencies at the exchanges in Chicago for years now. So it's a store of value, and as long as you can remember the passwords appear on your hard drive, you're relatively independent. And as long as there's electricity and you have access, you can still move around fairly freely and financially as a, let's say, free thinker, as a system critic. I've already lost bank accounts and various things have been tried against me. My Cyro entry is almost like an encyclopedia, you could say. So what do you have to do? Maybe it's a bridge we can use for now, and who knows how long it will last, but I don't want to completely demonize it.
So, in conclusion, there were at least a few conciliatory statements about censorship resistance. Of course, there's also nonsense being talked about quantum computers and whatever. Sure, there's a certain danger, but like I said, that danger isn't really in the next 1 or 2 years, maybe in the next 20 years or so at some point. And yeah, I don't think I need to say much more about that. I'm actually a bit shocked by all the statements here. But what was still important is that you don't have censorship resistance if you leave your Bitcoin on exchanges. And that's why I highly recommend this. I'll put a link down below for a TREZOR hardware wallet. In my opinion, one of the best hardware wallets on the market, where you are really protected from hacks, thieves, and any exchanges that could seize your Bitcoin. You have censorship resistance if you hold Bitcoin in self-custody. Buy Bitcoin with 21 Bitcoin and link it to the TREZOR hardware wallet. Set up an automatic transfer. Buy Bitcoin from 21 Bitcoin and transfer it to the TREZOR, eliminating third-party risk. And here you can easily buy Bitcoin with 21 Bitcoin and link it directly to the TREZOR hardware wallet. You can set up an automatic hardware wallet transfer, which is what I always recommend. That means you buy Bitcoin directly from 21 Bitcoin and then have it automatically transferred to the hardware wallet, to the TREZOR, and then you have no third-party risk and you're completely set up really well. And that's why I highly recommend this. Here you can also get a discount for both Bitcoin and TREZOR with the code BitcoinHotel, all in lowercase, and I'll put the links down below. And now please let me know what you think about the statements made here. Can you go along with this, or can you not go along with this? Also, maybe a little apology because the video today was a bit, say, aggressively worded, but there were a few statements that really triggered me, so I had to express myself a bit more aggressively today. Even though everyone on the panels are great people, I know some of them, and they really have some bomb views on politics. They criticize the system, they're completely system critical, they really go all out, and they let the chainsaw run wild. But when it comes to Bitcoin, I don't know if it really makes sense to attack it, because Bitcoin is a tool for freedom, and we should really come together and advocate for freedom. Bitcoin is a freedom tool, and we shouldn't pit the gold camp against the Bitcoin camp, because the real problem is the central banks, not whether gold or Bitcoin is better. Both are voluntary alternatives, and the fact that they are voluntary already means it can't be that bad. So I don't understand why there's this attack from the gold camp against Bitcoin, and I hope that eventually there will be a change in thinking. Until then, peace out. Both are voluntary alternatives, and the fact that they are voluntary already means it can't be that bad. So I don't understand why there's this attack from the gold camp against Bitcoin, and I hope that eventually there will be a change in thinking. Until then, peace out.